What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys had a great week out there, and why wouldn't you, baby? It is a holiday, a weekend, and you made it through the week, and it is Friday, and it's time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show. We're here on the channel every Friday. We recap all the major news for all the major FAANG stocks, plus Microsoft and Tesla, and then we go over the stock charts as well, and I think you're probably going to want to hang around for the stock chart session, because we've been pretty accurately predicting where these stocks have been heading over the last few months or so. Now, let's kick things off with earnings. One of the reasons why I think these stocks as a group are starting to melt up and start pushing upper limits of their price range is because we have earnings on tapped, and sellers want to maybe avoid upside surprises as we head into earnings and maybe announcements, those types of things. As sellers dry up, the buyers just send the price up, and we're seeing that with all these stocks. We'll see evidence of that, especially when we get over the stock chart. Now, earnings are on tap. Netflix reports on 7/20. That is just 18 days from now. Tesla is the day after, 19 days from now on 7/21. Microsoft will report on that day as well. Apple, we got to wait another week before we get any more FAANG news, but Apple is on 7/27. That is 25 days from now. Facebook will follow that up a day after on 7/28. And then finally, the last two companies to report on FAANG will be Amazon and Google on 7/29. That is 27 days from now. Let's kick things off like we always do with Facebook. They started the week at $343. We're a couple minutes before close, but we basically ended the week at about $354, $355 on Facebook. A big pop on Facebook. And you might ask, what the heck happened? Look, Facebook topped a $1 trillion evaluation as a judge dismissed an antitrust suit from the FTC and states. Now, this was really weird. Okay, look, I'm not necessarily what I would call a Facebook fanboy. There are things this company does to individuals, to news stories, those type of things I don't particularly agree with. There's other things that Facebook does that I really like and I really support. So I'm sometimes a little bit neutral when it comes to Facebook. I tell you what, I absolutely stone cold agree with this judge's decisions, because take a look. Facebook bought Instagram in 2012, 9 years ago, and they got regulatory approval when they bought it. The same thing for WhatsApp. They bought it in 2014. And guess what? They got approval for the deal back then. You can't go back. You just cannot go back and retroactively say, well, now you got a monopoly. 7 to 9 years later, it just doesn't work that way. And thankfully, we've got judges in this country that agree. They tossed out this suit, and Facebook stock went soaring that day. And here's the deal. Maybe you out there, maybe you believe Facebook has a monopoly. Here's the deal. Instagram plans some radical changes, no longer a photo sharing app. So first of all, just on the headlines, if you have a monopoly, would you have to make any changes other than raising the price or maybe even lowering the price to kind of wipe out competition? That's basically what a monopoly does. They lower the price to wipe out any competition, and then when the competition's gone, they jack up the price. Last time I checked, last time I logged into Facebook, I didn't have to pay any money. So they're not jacking up prices necessarily. Now you can look at it from the advertiser end, but here's the deal. Here's a quote from Adam Mosseri, who is the head of Instagram. This is a direct quote from him. He says, let's be honest, there's some really serious competition right now. TikTok is huge and YouTube is even bigger. And there's lots of other upstarts as well. You'll see us, referring to Instagram, do a number of things or experiment with a number of things in this space over the coming months. If they had a monopoly with Facebook and Instagram, they wouldn't have to do any of this. They would literally just be able to sit back and watch the competition die by the side of the road and make hand over fist money. They wouldn't have to worry about TikTok. They wouldn't have to worry about YouTube. But the fact is that they do. And that is because they don't have a monopoly. So look, I'm not a big user of Instagram. Whether or not this alienates existing users, brings on new ones, I don't know. This is the nature of social media, okay? A couple years ago, Snapchat was all of the things that the kids were using. Now they're probably using TikTok. Guarantee you in 2 years, they'll be using something other than TikTok. Will be old news. All the old people will be on TikTok. Now it'll be something else. That is what these kids will do. Now, the White House has not given up. He is said to be working on an executive order on antitrust. These executive orders are kind of like whatever, but we'll see what happens with this. I still believe, maybe it's cynical of me to believe this, but all this stuff, not necessarily this lawsuit that was actually taken to court and that we saw a judge actually rule on this, but this like executive orders and this threatening of like putting up a bill for a committee vote. I still think this is all for fundraising. Okay, they know Facebook and Google and Microsoft and all these companies have billions and billions of dollars, and they've been willing to donate to these parties, especially one particular party. And so now they're kind of threatening some action, and maybe they're expecting to get a little bit more dough. Because what is a politician like more than votes? Money. So we'll see what happens there. Now, Instagram begins testing an ad revenue sharing with publishers. Does this sound like a monopoly? Now you got to pay these people to actually post on Instagram. They're offering a 55% revenue split with creators, which is matching YouTube's rate. Here's what I hope for as somebody that makes a little bit of dough sometimes here on YouTube is maybe the competition makes YouTube pay 60%, 65%. That would be pretty nice. We'll see what happens there. Now, finally, Facebook Zuckerberg unveils a newsletter product entry into what is called Bulletin. I am not familiar with the other product that is called Substack, which is kind of a newsletter bulletin that I guess essentially kind of pays or at least splits some revenue with people that are posting on there. Now, Facebook is only opening this up to a small group of publishers, including sportscaster Aaron Andrews, but it appears that if this goes well, that we could continue to see this trend with Facebook. And what is the trend I'm talking about them? Having to pay people to actually post on Instagram, post on Facebook, those type of things, a more revenue sharing model, which certainly has been very successful for YouTube and continues to be. We'll see what happens there. Now, moving on to Apple, started the week at 134, end the week actually more than slightly higher, up to 139, close to $140 per share on this one. Get over the stock chart. It's exciting. Let me tell you what. Now, Apple and Intel are reportedly first to test chips using Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. I can't remember that company's names. 3 nanometer process. So look, I'm not a chip geek, but this is pretty freaking cool. Okay, so right now they're using most companies are using this 5 nanometer product, and the 5 nanometer refers to the space, I think, in between the chips or something like that. And obviously, the closer you get, the more performance, because there's less space, but also power that is required. And the 3 nanometer process is offering 10 to 15% computing performance boost, which is amazing how old computers are now. You're able to get a 10 to 15% boost just by a couple nanometers, 2 nanometer reduction, and power consumption by 25 to 30%. So you're reducing the amount of power, which means longer battery life, maybe other applications that might be battery intensive. Very exciting if you are a computer geek, and even if you're not. Roku rises 3% as Apple buys a spot on the remote control. So if you're not familiar with this, you get a Roku or something like that, and then that they have these remote controls, and they have preset like Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus, and in this case, Apple TV, and those companies actually have to pay for those buttons. And it's highly coveted. And what it does show is that Roku is kind of in a king-making position among the streaming services, okay? To get your button on there is a big deal, okay? There's a lot of people with Roku devices. And just broadly, me kind of thinking out loud here, is I'm wondering what Roku's next move is. Like, does Roku want to be acquired? Does Roku really want to go down the path of Apple and Netflix and Disney and have to invest literally billions of dollars into original content? Because that's really probably their next move. Not only that, ad-supported content as well. Do they really want to do that? Or do they just want to sell and ride off into the sunset? We'll see what happens. Obviously, regulators would have a lot to talk about if that happens. Now, moving on to Amazon. Start of the week at, we'll call it $28.90. Really? No, that's over the last year. I was like, whoa, that was a big move. Okay, so fake out. Amazon actually started the week at $3,440 and ended the week still up. When we get over the stock chart, interesting stuff happening with the Amazon stock chart. Ended the week at $3,510, and off the top of your head, you should know that that $3,500 level for Amazon is a critical level. Now, Amazon plans to deploy their full Rivian, excuse me if I don't pronounce that right, but that's an electric vehicle delivery van company. They plan to deliver that by 2030. They have by 2022, which is like next year, they're going to do 10,000 of its, which I think reverts to Amazon's EV delivery fleet on the road, and the remaining 100,000 vehicles on order from this company should be deployed by 2030, which is just couple years from now, I guess. So Amazon is opening its first robotics fulfillment center in Alberta, Canada, I believe. And this is to produce, I love right in the beginning, we're going to open up this robotic fulfillment center and create 1,000 full-time and part-time jobs. They make it sound so awesome in that, oh, you know, we're supporting everything, and they donated some crayons and some Lego sets or something like that. I love Amazon's PR. Here's what they're trying to do, guys. Okay, if you haven't noticed, Amazon's trying to jack up the wages. Okay, they're paying $15, $16 an hour, which on the surface seems great. They don't want their workers to unionize, which I tend to agree with as well. But here's the ultimate end game that Amazon wants to do. They just want to replace everybody by robots, okay? They don't want to employ millions of people. They don't want to do that, okay? They're going to get EV. They're going to start with EV trucks. Then they're going to get to self-driving and drones and things like that. They don't want people delivering the packages. They certainly don't want them picking it out of a warehouse as well. So they're going to open more of these robotic fulfillment centers where, yes, you will have some staff there, but it's going to be a fraction of what is going to be needed in the future because these robots will do a better job. They won't complain. They won't unionize. They don't require $16 an hour. These types of, again, I'm not trying to sound cynical here. I'm just telling you these are the facts, okay? And as an investor, you got to put away your political biases. You got to put away a lot of your stuff and just focus on the facts. And that's what we're doing here with Amazon. Now, and by the way, Amazon's my largest holding of any stock that I own. So I'm saying this believing what they're going to do, whether it's the right thing to do to workers, those types of things. Look, I'll let other people make those arguments. From a profit perspective, it's awesome. Okay, Amazon wants FTC chair Khan, which I think was just announced that was approved. So Lena Khan, they want that person recused from any matters involving Amazon due to Khan's past comments. So Khan has on numerous occasions argued that Amazon is guilty of antitrust violations and should be broken up. So they suggest that this lady has already made up her mind, and now she's on the FTC. Now she's like the FTC chair. And so we'll see what happens. Again, I don't necessarily think that President Biden, and President Biden is just one part of a bigger Democratic Party that gets lots of money from Amazon, that gets lots of positive press from the Washington Post, which is owned not necessarily by Amazon, but by Amazon's founder, among other things. I am not convinced that they're trying to lay the hammer down on these companies. Maybe I will be wrong with that, but I'm just not convinced that you'd bite the hand that feeds you to a certain degree, and that you are looking like you want to bite the hand that feeds you, maybe to appease some voter groups, maybe to appease something that. But I think the ultimate goal is to get money out of Amazon and retain some power over Amazon as well. So nothing that politicians like more than votes, money, and power. Those three things is what they eat, breathe, and sleep. Now, moving on. It sounds so cynical on today's podcast. It's a Friday, and it's a great day. Moving on to Netflix, starting the week at $528, ended the week at $533. I've read your comments. I've heard them. We will be adding some more stocks to this at some point. I'm just trying to figure out how to do it and not lengthen the show by any certain degree. I've heard the calls for adding NVIDIA instead of Netflix. We will take that up at some point, maybe after earnings. Not a lot of news out of Netflix this week, other than that they report earnings here in about 2 to 3 weeks' time. Moving on to Google, start of the week at $2,450. There's a broken record in my room because this stock just keeps going up. And when you get over the stock chart, you'll see Google's going up. I think it's pulling Facebook up. And if Facebook and Google go up, it's just going to pull this whole group with it. Okay. And Google's just been on a monster run now. It's at $2,505. When we get over the stock chart on that, you just won't believe it. Alphabet turns negative. This was obviously earlier in the week. I mean, Google's like Teflon. Okay. It is like just some bad news comes in and it just slides right off. Okay. Alphabet turns negative as DOJ steps up ad tech scrutiny. So this started under the previous Donald Trump administration, but it looks like Joe Biden's Justice Department, which probably has a lot of carryovers, I would assume, or people that have been there for a long time. It looks like they're going to continue this, investigating the ads, investigating AdSense, those types of things. I'm sure it will end in some kind of fine, some kind of slap on the wrist, and Google will go on as a multi-trillion-dollar company. Google Messages to become the default messaging app on AT&T's US Android phone. So I didn't know. I've had an Apple phone forever. I've never used an Android phone, but I thought this was interesting. If you're on AT&T, I guess you have a choice of what messaging app you have, but in the future you won't, because Google will be the default there. Now, Microsoft, this was really cool. Microsoft and Google are reportedly ending the truce against lobbying attacks. So what this reminds me of is I have two little boys. One's 4 and one's 2. And as you can imagine, sometimes these guys like fight and then they start pointing the finger at each other. He did it. He did it. He did it. And so it appears that Microsoft and Google kind of had a truce there for a while where they wouldn't be like, he did it, he did this, he did this. Well, it looks like that's ending, or at least that they're not excited about doing that. And so what it has to do with is Microsoft is upset that Google's cloud platform is competing with Azure. And obviously they're both competing with Amazon's AWS. And Microsoft wants to like be on the side and kind of like have like your brother cause all the trouble, and then Microsoft wants to just kind of be on the side and then go point to mom and dad, say, oh, look what they're doing, look what they're doing, look what they're doing. That's what I see, and we'll see if they're able to get away with it. We'll see what happens there. Speaking of Microsoft, start of the week at $267. Hello, this one popped. You can imagine when we get over the stock chart with this one, it's going to look great. End of the week at $277. They bolted on over $10 per share. Yeah, you guessed it. This one has popped like it's hot. Now, Microsoft is increasing its legal staff as antitrust scrutiny intensifies. So they're going to, their legal and corporate affairs unit is going to be boosted by 20%. So you got to love this. Who's going to get rich over the next few years when it comes to antitrust, all these investigations into Microsoft and Google and Facebook? Who's going to get rich? Number one, the lawyers. Number two, the politicians. Okay, which are almost all politicians, at least here in the United States, are actually lawyers or former lawyers or failed lawyers, as some people might point out. So look, it's just a big kickback scheme. That is what's going to happen. These companies got to fight this. Some of these things are baseless. Some of these things have legitimate things. They're going to have to fight them in court, and we'll see what happens. Luckily, the legal system in the United States, while not perfect, tends to work relatively well to a certain degree. Guess depends on which way you're looking at it, but I think it works okay. Now, moving on to Tesla. Start of the week at 681, sideways a little bit, 679. Some big news out of Tesla is they recalled 285,000 cars in China for an online software fix. So the initial thing is, oh my gosh, 285,000 cars. That's really bad, but guess what? It's all fixed during a free remote online software fix. So this is what's awesome about Teslas is, now look, if it's a seat belt or something like that requires a part, and certainly Tesla's not immune to this, or any car maker, well, they'll have to bring them into a service station or send somebody out remotely to fix these things. But this is fixed by an online software fix, and all should be nice. Now, Tesla topped 200,000 deliveries for Q2. They delivered 1,890 Model S and Model X cars, about 199,000 Model 3 and Model Y, so like 10 times more of the cheaper models for Q2, for a total of a slightly over 201,000 cars. Now, analysts were expecting between 181 and 230, so depending on how you look at it, it's either kind of in the middle of the range, or it fell, more than 10%, 15% short of the high end of the range. But we've got chip shortages, those types of things, I think, all is forgiven, and Tesla didn't really react super negatively to that announcement. Now, here's what's interesting. Are electric vehicles cleaner than gasoline cars? And so this is a topic that's brought up a lot out here in California. The governor and the government out here in California wants everybody to have an electric car, but it would literally shut down our power. Like our power would like shut off if everybody had an electric car. So what's interesting is in some countries where they're using a lot of more renewable energy, that the break even is actually, you have to drive that car over 8,000 miles. But in countries like China and Poland, which use more like coal and like maybe quote unquote dirty energy, you have to drive that thing 78,000 miles, which is a lot. Look, depending on how you're driving your car, that's a lot. That could take years, maybe even over a decade to put that many miles on your car, to where it might just be better to drive a really fuel efficient gasoline car. These are the discussions that are going to continue as we move forward in the EV space. We'll go over to Google here in a second, but it might be interesting that we flash Google, because look at Google, boom. And guess what? They're in the exact same business as Facebook, and it's not to be much surprise that Facebook's stock chart is absolutely popping. And so we talked about a couple weeks ago, we got above this 330 level on Facebook, and look, the sky was the limit. This is like, you're in a boat and you're close to shore, and the boat's just hitting up against the waves. But then you turn on your motor and you get out to the middle of the lake, and it's super calm because there's nobody out there. The waves aren't coming back and forth. You don't have to worry about the tide, and you're just nice and calm. That is what happens when a stock breaks to all-time highs, okay? You're basically out in uncharted waters and very calm waters. There's no sellers. There's no turbulence. There's no choppiness. This thing could just continue to go up and up. Look, we know that it won't, but in the meantime, it will. And you notice with Google, we've been on since September of last year, this stock's basically just been continuing. Now, yes, it's gone sideways several times, but it has been locked in an uptrend for like 14 months, like not quite 12 months, but very close. We're like 2-3 months away from a 12-month uptrend. So you tell me, this Facebook uptrend started just 3 months ago. So if that is the start of something, we are still 6-7 months of uptrend potentially with Facebook. Now, any sideways consolidation, any pullback to a trend line. Look, this trend line, you can draw this in a number of different ways. You can push it up, you can push it down, you can put it on the top of you could like create a channel if you want. I don't really care what you do with this. Any pullback in this one, at least in the intermediate term, is a buying opportunity, and then look, we've got earnings coming up with this company. You get a big drawdown on that. Could be a buying opportunity. We'll see what happens. Now, hello, this is exciting. We've got Apple at a critical level. We talked about this 139 level, 138 level with Apple. This has been a critical level, okay? It's not quite all-time highs. We chopped up above this. In fact, got all the way up to 145, but it was all on red candles, and the stock came down very quickly. But we put up a big green candle here on Apple. So here's what I'm expecting or anticipating heading into next week is a follow-through on this green candle. You follow through on this green candle, you're looking to push up into the 145 range. I'd be watching this closely, 145, but look, this is as clear as an uptrend as you possibly can get. And I would actually be surprised if this stock breaks this trend. This looks super strong to me. I think we're going to push above this 145 level. We'll probably push into it before we get to Apple's earnings on 7/27, and then we'll see how Apple's earnings are digested, okay? I don't think they're necessarily going to be as good as last quarter, so we'll see how the market digests those. Amazon, almost very similar to Apple, although we did not break above this level, and I think this trend line's in a pretty good spot. You could drop it down to here technically, and we're hitting our heads on it. This green candle's very close to it, but you notice that this $3,500 level with Amazon has been the area of resistance really since September of last year, and we have not been able to get above it. So what I'm looking for with Amazon is similar to Apple. You're looking to push above this. You're really looking for a push above 35.60 or so, 35.65, somewhere in that range. You're looking for a push above that. You get above that. This thing could run just like Google and Facebook have. Now, moving on to Netflix, same thing. We talked about this area of consolidation down here. This started back in March, April or so, and it consolidated, relatively tightly for several months, and then we broke out. I wouldn't surprise me at all. We're sitting here at 533 on Netflix. Again, they are the first to report in 18 days. Wouldn't surprise me. We're actually sitting at a level. I don't have the line drawn in, but it was an area of support here, resistance here, a little bit of support here, not much here, kind of chopped through it. But we can get above this 540 level. Well, 555, the 560, even back up into the highs of 580, 590 on this one. Certainly in play. Wouldn't at all shock me if we just kind of melt up into those ranges on that stock as well, heading into earnings just in a couple of weeks. Google, just turn on the broken record. This thing is locked in an uptrend. Big green candle. I mean, not the biggest green candle that we've seen along this trend line, but this is a pretty big green candle. I'll zoom in a little bit since this thing's been in an uptrend really since September. And you could draw this trend line in a number of different ways. Again, you could channel this. You could put one on top. I don't really care, how you do this. It doesn't really matter too much. But here we are with Google. We're just locked up in a channel. And in my opinion, we're probably heading higher. Okay, you put this big green candle in there, you follow it up again on Monday or Tuesday with another one, and 26 in play, 2650s in play. Again, this company doesn't report until the end of the month, so this one just could continue to move. Now, here's the deal though. Facebook does report. You do have Snapchat. You do have Pinterest. Those companies will likely report. I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume that they're reporting maybe even before Google. Depending on their reports, Google will react a little bit to them. But man, Google is just on a monster run, and it doesn't appear like it wants to slow down anytime soon. Speaking of monster runs, we talked about Microsoft here. This is the Microsoft chart. We talked about if we got and I say this, you can go, I don't delete any of the videos. I don't edit them. You can't edit them after the fact. I said numerous times, we get above this 260 level, 263, 265, whatever you want to call it. You got above it. We were in clear skies, clear waters, however, whatever analogy you want to put it. Boom, big, gigantic green candle that we printed here with Microsoft all the way up to all-time. I think these are all-time highs or very close to it. They might have made all-time highs back in the 90s, but we're sitting at 277 on this one, and we have just made a monster leg. Okay, so we had this uptrend intact back here. So we had this uptrend that started way back here, like October, November of last year. So this was a big uptrend that we made, and it wasn't like super steep, and we were kind of bouncing around. Well, now we're on a new uptrend, and it is really steep. Okay, we are like this. Okay, so we will probably pull back. We'll definitely pull back. We'll sideways consolidate with Microsoft, but this is a very, very, very bullish sign for that stock as well. Now, finally, Tesla. So we talked about with Tesla, a couple weeks ago, we were sitting at the bottom of this triangle. So we've made kind of this wedge or this triangle, whatever you want to call. And I talked about how it wants to go one way or another. If it broke below 550, we were going lower and probably much lower, probably all the way down to 400. If it broke above, it brought back in play the $700 level, which is basically where we're at now, brings back in 800, 900, even maybe upwards of $1,000 with Tesla. Now, it sideways consolidated all week. Okay, it hit its head on this $700 level. We could pull back in the coming week, back down to 650 on this one. Actually, we're sitting right here at 677. We could pull back to 660, even 650 on this one. I wouldn't be concerned. We're still in an uptrend. We've got a low here, higher low, higher low. You make a low somewhere in here, higher low, not at all concerned, but you're looking for a break above 700 on this one to really kind of confirm that this uptrend is intact. Get above 700, your next stop is 740, maybe 780. Get above those levels. These all-time highs back up at 800 and 900 are back in play. I just want to show you the earnings again. 18 days. I know we haven't posted a lot of videos to our channel, but don't worry. We're just taking a breath, spend a little time with family. I've informed them over the next 2 months. It'll be very busy. We've got bank stocks in a week or two. Then we've got all the major FAANG stocks, and you got all the other, blue chip stocks that we tend to cover here on the channel. Have a great 4th of July weekend. Get out, spend some time with your family. Have a great weekend. We will see you again next week here on the channel. Good luck with your investments.